first, we're going to start with the Daily Trust newspaper. Let's take a look at what is trending on the front pages. The bolder headlines states no automatic tickets for National Assembly members, APC. You can read that on page 3 and page 4. And just below the leaflet, we have Arafat, Saudi wants pilgrims of heat wave. That story is on page 32 of the Daily Trust newspaper. And then also just above the bolder headlines, we have Mokwa, bodies of 7 children recovered as search continues. That story is on page 10 of the Daily Trust newspaper. And then we also have Army chiefs relocate to Benue as 270 killed in 2 months. You can read that story on page 6. Okay, we have another catchy headline here. Tinubu Matawale should be commended for reinvigorated Navy, says Deyemi Saka. You can see the full story on page 14 of the Daily Trust newspaper. And of course, we also have parents seek alternatives over prolonged FCT teachers strike. The story is on page 20 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Okay, Lillian.
All right, now moving on now, let's take a look at Vanguard. On Vanguard, there, Niger flood, 1,249 communities in 30 states, and FCT at risk, said the federal government. Says no water was released from Kanji Jeba dams. Notes flood caused by heavy rainfall and heightened by global warming. And as a state take up federal government's challenge. Now, on Vanguard, you will see the high flood risk states listed there. So please look and check that up. Now, still on Vanguard, at the top, USSD charges, telcos threaten to withdraw services over banks' misinformation. We had that story, in our news segment. And COAs as Chief of Army Staff Oluyede relocates to Benue with PSOs. Killer herders created community of widows, Benue women cry out. Anti-kidnapping protest on easy claim as soldiers, policemen take over Abraka. And on insecurity, Tinubu Matawale should be commended for reinvigorating the Navy. And then federal government saves 12 million girls from cervical cancer in 9 months. Presidency to Afenifere, Tinubu's economic reforms painful but necessary. Well, those are the stories we have on the front pages of Vanguard. Do well to grab yourself a copy and keep yourself informed.
Okay, but let's take a look at the Nigerian Tribune, where the bolder headline states, still on Benue killings. Army chief moves in, deploys more troops, logistics. You can read that story on page 5 of the Nigerian Tribune. And then we also have man falls from Cocoa House, topmost floor. That story is on page 4, just above or rather below the bolder headlines of the Nigerian Tribune. And then also we have USSD banking charges to be deducted from airtime, says NCC. That story is on page 7 of the Nigerian Tribune. And also we still have Mokwa flood, which of course is on the lips of everyone. Federal government blames climate change, regulated, unregulated buildings, damage devastating Niger government. You can see the story on page 3. If you want to read more on all of the stories on the Nigerian Tribune, do well to grab yourself a copy and get informed. So joining us to review some of the headlines on the pages of today's newspaper is Mr. Ben Shimang, which is the former director, News Voice of Nigeria. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ben. Thank you for joining us. All right.
Thank you.
We're talking about the flooding. That's what is on some of the papers this morning and the headline discussions, Now, what do you make with seeing what is happening in Mokwa, seeing that NEMET had given predictions and warnings, and they're even saying that FCT is at risk. What do you make on the level of flood preparedness in Nigeria and how this keeps, recurring year in, year out?
It's a pity that these natural disasters are happening, and our response Our responses have always been that of very, very reactive on the side of, say, government. But even though named this federal government agency, they've been very, very proactive in terms of telling Nigerians,
Please, can you
warning them,
increase the volume?
advising them. These states are likely to have rainfall. In fact, it's scientific. When they say it will happen, it will happen. You know, but again, the valleys where rain will always, water will always come and pass, have been taken over by unplanned buildings, unapproved buildings. When some people were given testimonies in Mokwa, they said, look, some of these valleys, even though the river or the water dried up, but they were known to be streams where water was passing. So when the excess water came in, of course, it has to look for its former way, and it therefore found where it could pass. But again, the blame game came in. No, it is excess water being released by the federal government in Kainji Dam, you know. Kainji and Jeba dams. I'm not sure the government will just be that callous to just say you release water without warning people. Even Cameroon that releases from Labdo Dam, they usually would warn Nigeria. They have excess water that they have to release so that Nigeria gets set. But even at that, year in, year out, we get all these warnings. But our people are stubbornly still staying there. In the end, we are blaming government. In the end, we are blaming National Emergency Management Agency for not supplying relief materials. Why will you want palliatives when you can as well look for solid ground, high grounds to build your house? And on the side of the authorities, why is it that when structures are on ground, nobody goes to mark? Nobody goes to say, look, this place, we're going to evacuate you because the demolition will take place. Just like you are talking about FCT, an area that is always prone to this is around Kubwa. The same thing with Lugbe here. And in Lugbe, where I also live, there are some places that some people change the course of the stream. And when there is overflow of water, of course, it visits any house on its way. And even when they've been marked, I want to tell you, Lillian, I passed there on Sunday while going to church. I saw that shops have opened, houses have opened, places that have been marked for demolition. So it is time for FCT to move in to avert any destruction or any disaster.
So, talking about the FCT, there's another issue that has been on the headlines, concerning parents seeking an alternative over prolonged FCT's teacher strike. I mean, parents out there in the FCT that have their children in public schools are looking out, for affordable private schools so that their kids will not be at home and they get the necessary education that they need. So now my question to you, Mr. Ben, is really, the public schools are created for, parents and people that cannot afford to put their children in private schools, which of course is not a bad thing. I mean, so far the government schools are doing exceedingly well. When you go on competitions, you see, this government school students doing well, coming top in most of the competitions. And now, the schools are shut. What are your thoughts on that?
There was this Teachers' Day that was celebrated here in Abuja, and I had reasons to interview one of the teachers in Eagle Square. He simply defined a teacher as the least article of trade when it comes to commerce. He then applied it to governance. And so when it comes to the very least, those who don't categorize as anything at all, he just said they are the teachers. But you see, the teacher taught the president. The teacher taught the richest people how to make the money. Now, and the aspiration of every teacher is that the pupil goes higher. And yes, they are going higher. But when they now go that high, what do they give the teachers in return? And that's why in FCT, you just see their salaries are paid differently. There are people they call LGA, local government authority teachers. There is those we call SUBEC, all sorts of, and that also tells you the segregation in there. You are on the same level, you are in the same school, and you are paid different salaries. Then the next thing is, even those salaries are not coming the way they ought to be coming. Promotions, they get promoted, but no money back in the promotion. And when it comes, oh, years are cut away to just start as it is. You also see that, yes, even though some people parents are saying they're looking for alternatives, sometimes the alternatives might not be too palatable. We should be wary of some schools that simply dash marks just to encourage parents. We do know that some secondary schools, primary secondary schools owned by government are actually doing their best, but in terms of welfare, they ought to be taken care of. Teachers don't go into what you call conferences. They don't go into training like other civil servants in order to improve on their knowledge. They're just left just that way. In terms of pension, they have the worst of the worst. So why won't there be a reflection in the educational system, even in the FCT? And the FCT, private schools are making people very, very dry, and in fact, they just see it as an avenue to make money. Even the teachers there, sometimes some of them are paid based on how many pupils they have poached from other schools and brought to their current school. So it's like the banking sector, where you will recruit people and say, look, go and get people to come and open an account. How much you get into the bank is how much you'll be paid. In the same way, teachers are told, go and bring pupils, and from those pupils you've brought, from their salary, from their school fees, you'll be paid. So everybody is living under tension, giving all sorts of deadlines, giving all sorts of the pegged amount to be brought. Education is not left behind. And one would have thought that since Wike, some people say, is doing very, very well in terms of physical infrastructure, educationally, he should also try for the teachers. There's no point still owing them what they call minimum wage. What does it take to pay the primary school teachers? What really? How much is it? And even if it is big, who is saying that education has less value than any other side sector of the economy or society? So I think that the teachers deserve their best via Wiki, and I believe he should implement what has been promised, what government has also promised, because the FCT budget has just been passed, so kudos to them, but the teachers should be paid.
All right, the teachers indeed, should be held in high esteem, and their welfare does matter for our future, which is the children. Now, Army Chief relocates to Benue. Let's touch a bit on insecurity. Army Chief relocates to Benue as 270 people have been killed in 2 months. Do you think his presence there would see any difference? And is this, or they will say better late than never? I mean, should he have gone earlier?
Well, should he have gone earlier? Yes, I think so. But as he's gone now, I believe that things might change. I'm saying this out of experience. The other time that you had Buratai, who was Chief of Army Staff, he had to relocate to Maiduguri. And I remember I was an embedded correspondent. We went into the trenches with him. We were sleeping in the bushes with the soldiers with him. And that morale was that high. I remember that night when Major Abu Ali was instantly met a lieutenant colonel. That thick night with campfire, and soldiers were dancing all over the place that night. So the fact that Lieutenant General Oluwede has gone to Benue, is now relocating to that place, is like the story of the mother bee, who indeed can tamper with the mother bee, that the other bees will not sting such a person. So for the Chief of Army Staff to be in Benue, this is the right thing to be done, and we expect that even as the Senate was saying that there should be a barrack being sent to Benue State, it's not just about the barracks. You can see the army architecture itself. GOCs are there, the chief of army staff is there, and with joint operations with the Air Force base there, it's going to be a nice job. And I think that people should not politicize it. When soldiers are moving, they should move without some people always saying that no, the enemies were left and innocent ones were killed. Sometimes you pursue the enemies and they just hibernate amongst the innocent ones. But again, the innocent ones should be able to identify who the enemies are, so that we have it best. Controlled items, AK-47 and other calibers of gun that ought to be properties of government are simply finding their ways easily into the hands of non-state actors. So we expect that the police, and that is just their job, they ought to also take care of this internal security. We ought to have seen by now that during Buhari's time, every single year, he was supposed to have recruited 10,000 policemen. For 8 years, we would have recruited 800,000 policemen. We wouldn't have been into this mess. The soldiers wouldn't have been taking care of roadblocks and all that stuff. You only call in the soldiers to aid civil authority when it is more than what the police can do. But the police have simply left it for the soldiers, for the military to do, which is an aberration. So for the chief of army staff to be in Benue is kudos to government. That is what we want. That's what security is all about. That's being sensitive, and we expect that they have to kind of show their prowess, the powers, the capability to control, to dominate, to seize and handle the situation very well as professionals.
Thank you so much, Ben Shemang, Mr. Ben Shemang. Thank you so much for always creating out time, to join us on Newspaper Review, to also share your insights. We do appreciate your presence. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, to our listeners out there, we've come to the end of Daybreak this morning. Thank you so much for sticking around. We hope you've picked something from our conversation this morning. Let's do this again tomorrow. My name is Lilian Ogazi.
And I am Mimuna Bagudu. Do have enjoy the rest of your day and stay out of trouble. Bye-bye.